What story do you even tell? That is the question I have been asking myself over and over again. My accounts haven't been getting as much traction, both on social media platforms and here on YouTube, as I'd like. And one of the pieces of advice I see over and over and over again is you got to tell your story. What is your origin story? And as somebody who is neurospicy and has experienced so much drastic change, I've had countless jobs and I have so many interests. I've moved around a million times. I don't know what I want my origin story to be. And I really had to sit with that because I want to connect with people like me. I want to inspire people who have a similar story to mine. So I really had to sit down and figure out what story it was I wanted to share. And I did share that. I will try to insert that link somewhere here. But the time it took to figure out what I wanted to share was more than I expected. But since I did start sharing, a little bit of my origin story, which in a 10-second summary is I was working a traditional job, I got my dream job, and even that wasn't enough to help my mental health. It still left me depressed and anxious and knowing that no matter what, I needed to get out of the traditional job market and do something that worked for me. Because if double pay and living in the dream location and getting to relocate across the country wasn't enough, nothing was going to be. Okay, obviously that was more than 10 seconds, but you get the point. That is the origin story that I am setting up for myself. And was that origin story 10 years ago at 18, the day I graduated high school? No, that journey that led me here started 2.5 years ago. I quit that job, well, not really quit, left that job in December of 2024. So it's been almost a year and a half. And a big part of the reason why I did pick that as my origin story was because it felt relatable. When I look at who my target audience is, it's witches, it is neurospicy people, it is people who often cannot work in a traditional job, or at least not long term. It's the people who are different, who are weird, who don't like society the way it is and want to prioritize feeling good, finding happiness, finding peace and joy, and just building a life worth living. And I think for me, what was really important was finding the origin story where I could speak to those people. I could say, I see you because I feel that. I experienced that myself because I did. And once I started sharing that story, I started receiving, you know, comments and messages and more actual connection with the people who are the people I want to reach. But I still often find myself in this place of what stories do I share? What parts of my life do I want to open up? Because by nature, I am honestly a pretty private person. I I like talking. I like sharing some of my stories and experiences, but I don't share everything. And I think that is also okay. The things I do share are the things that are important to me and important to the business I am building. So it's about my witchcraft journey. It is about my art. It is about mental health because that has always been a really big struggle, and important part of my story. But there's also that balance. The things I don't share, I had to think about that. I had to be like, okay, what do I not want to share? What do I not want to share just right now, but I might in the future? I don't talk about my partner a lot. I reference him as my partner, but he doesn't like being on camera, and that's totally fine. I don't expect him to show up on camera. I won't divulge those details of, our intimate relationship and things like that. Other things I don't really share a lot of are about my cooking and baking, and I love doing that 100%. I've written books, I've written recipes, I've written many blog posts, and it's something that I might incorporate more in the future because it is definitely one of my special interests and has been. But as for right now, it doesn't really pertain to what I am building. And being so multi-passionate, it can be difficult because you have to straddle this line of what do I share and what do I not? Because as much as I would love to share all of my special interests and all of my hobbies, I really have come to realize that that makes it harder to reach my ideal target. And I didn't think I would necessarily reach that point either. I feel like I'm going off on a little side tangent here. Because especially earlier in my journey, I felt like not sharing all the important pieces was, in a way, abandoning parts of myself. I feel like I've just put that into words for the first time. But in reality, it isn't. You know, the cooking and the baking and, to an extent, my kitchen magic, I leave that now in this time being as something that is just for me, something that I do for myself, something that I can find joy in and find happiness in, because I really do. I love cooking, but that I don't necessarily have to share that to an extent externally. May I in the future? Probably. Cookbook has always been one of the things on my list to have, like a real nice cookbook. It would make me so happy. But in this moment, it's not what I'm wanting to do, and that's okay. It's all part of my story, though. And when you are on social media, whether you are being on camera or looking at the people on camera, right? You're always seeing just a small percentage. You don't know all of somebody's real life. You don't know all of their story. You don't know everything they've overcome and everything they're going through in the moment, and that is okay. But when you're a new creator, at least for me, it felt like, in a way, I had to share all those pieces. And not because somebody was telling me to, but because it just felt important. I think for me, sometimes it can be hard to sift through what is important in a moment to share and what is not important. But finding a way to repeat my story, even if it's just specific parts of my story, in new ways, definitely seems to be how I am connecting with a lot of the people I want to be connecting. You may have heard of, top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel kind of content. And I feel like the stories where you get to know me personally are, more middle of funnel. They're not the quick, funny reels that pull you in and make you want to be interested in the other things. They're the stories where you really get to know the person behind the camera without them also being the bottom of the funnel, which is where, you know, the funnel here, sales are at the bottom, but, you know, some days I work better than others. And if I edited this, I would probably cut this little section out here. But, here we are 9 minutes into the video and I am not undoing it. The point is, I have found a way to tell my story, the part that holds true for me and connects with people who feel similar. And that for me seems to be the sweet spot, the spot that is building connections and helping things do well. And I'm happy for that. Does it feel a little confusing at times? What is the next best thing to do? Absolutely. Sometimes it also feels like I might be saying the wrong thing, or I might be anxious about what people think. But I think that vulnerability, or at least vulnerability as it feels to me, builds and shows authenticity. I am a human on the other side of the screen. I do go through things. I didn't just appear, who was it, like Athena fully formed and ready to go, ready for battle. No, it took a lot to get me here. And I recognize that so many people are on different parts of the journey that I took myself. And one of my goals is to help people get there, whatever their goals are. Like, whatever your dreams, you deserve to be able to build that life that makes you happy. And social media and YouTube videos are just a really good tool to do that. If working a traditional job isn't what you want, if entrepreneurship is what you want, sometimes that's how you get there. So, this my challenge to you is to think about what you want your origin story to be. It doesn't have to start the day you were born. It doesn't have to start the day you turn 18. Mine, for all intents and purposes, starts 2.5 years ago when I got the job offer, the dream job offer that didn't work out. For me, my origin story starts at the moments leading up to the pivotal turning point for me, which was making the final decision that I was not going to try and work a traditional job anymore, that I was going to become an entrepreneur, and no matter what, I was going to make that work, because I couldn't put myself through the constant burnout and depression and the back and forth that working a traditional job put me through. And the making of that decision was my turning point. The things leading up to that turning point was my origin story. And am I going to add details? Absolutely. Will I continue to talk about it? Absolutely, because it seems to be what resonates. But it might expand. I might go further back. I might share different aspects and different sides. But for now, that's where I'm at. So, what is your origin story? What is your turning point? When have you made the decision that you have to change things? And if it's right now, that's amazing. What brought you to this point? Finding out what your story is important, because by nature, humans, we're storytellers. We like stories. We engage with stories. And a lot of people talk about this, or have started talking about it more. There's great books on telling stories, and how that is very pivotal for marketing, right? If you just see a painting on a wall, cool, it's a painting. But if that painting is attached to a story about how this person went through all these things, or what they were feeling when they did it, or how it reminds them of the sunset of the beach they visited as a child, that connects, that makes things stronger. It makes them stick. It makes it memorable. When you tell your story as a person, as a creator, as an influencer, as somebody being present online, or honestly, probably even things like speeches. No, I don't do that. It does the same thing. It engages, it makes people feel like they can connect, like they can relate, that they understand better. And not everybody will understand, but it's also a good way to filter your audience and find your audience. The people who understand, the people who get it, they'll get it. And those are your people. So, yeah, let me know what your origin story is if you want to share it in the comments, because I would love to hear, because you do have one. You might not know where you want that story to start, but you can always try something. And if you don't like it, try something new. We're all learning here. We're all expanding. We're all trying new things. And I think that is what's important. Anyways, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next video.